Welcome everybody to the Genus Brewing live stream. As always, let us know how we're looking, sounding, tasting, all that goodness.
Yeah. All right. I feel like this needs to be just a little bit closer. Oh, that's right. I have my volume on. Don't do that.
I like mine super close. That way I can not necessarily have to talk super loud.
I just like the intimacy of it. Be right there. All right. So, welcome in. You know, we're getting everybody in here. We're getting Peter's got to get the feed. Know what's going on.
Find out how we're looking. It looks like we're framed relatively well.
Yeah.
Looking good. Looking more.
Let's go,
It's Ryan.
People.
Morning, Matt. Morning, Reverend KY. Morning, everybody else.
You know,
look good and sound good. Awesome.
Oh, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know Wiser.
Wiser.
Yeah.
He watches every morning.
Hey, Matt.
You know. He's
Let's,
a faithful watcher. That's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Are most of the watchers Spokane?
I would say there's usually between like 10 and 15 people that are from Spokane that watch. Everybody shout out where you're from so that Ryan can find out where everyone that's watching is from. Let's jump into some Genus or Hello Brew news. Let's start with you, Ryan. Any new things going on with Hello Brew Co?
Last night we had the Battle of the Brewery finish up at Steady Flow just around the corner. We won that, so that was
awesome.
Exciting.
That's actually pretty good. I've had the raspberry sour that was on there.
Yeah,
and that thing was amazing.
That was the second most votes. Beer. That beer was great. And then next weekend, waiting to confirm it, but might do an off-flavor class at Steady Flow.
Oh, nice.
Sunday around noonish. So definitely keep your eyes out for that for people that are local. And then a beer dinner at Laguna Cafe next Sunday as well.
Ooh, fun.
4-course beer pairing.
That sounds awesome.
Hell yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people are especially going to be interested in that off flavor. Wiser's going to go 100%. Calling it right now.
Yeah, he is.
Fun.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, we'll make fun of him.
Exactly. It's good learning though. I've done a couple of off flavor just experiments with just a handful of friends, and they're always a good time to be like, oh, that's how that flavor comes across.
Yeah.
It's always good to remind yourself.
Attaching the
flavor to
word.
Exactly. We have been running out of IPAs. I feel like we've said this like 2 out of the last 3 weeks. We keep running out of IPAs here. We make 2-barrel batches, and if we're busy, 2 barrels can go by really, really fast. So we actually have one of Hello beers on tap right now. Thanks for bringing that over, by the way.
Problem.
That saved our butts yesterday. We probably sold like 20 of them yesterday.
Awesome.
Yeah. Working on some videos leading into a brunch that we're doing May 23rd at the Steel Barrel. You've probably already seen a couple of those, but we put one out on Chef Gina's YouTube channel. She's just basically talking about a really quick, easy way to make a brunch setup, and the food looked and tasted amazing. Pichichi round 2.
Pichichi round 2. It's tasting quite awesome, you know. I think we got a little bit more hibiscus character out of it this time. It was honestly really hard to put the peach flavoring in there. I wanted to keep it just like plain hibiscus because it was tasting so good. But we all know how good Pichichi was with the peach hibiscus in there. So it had to go. It had to do it.
Yeah, you just had to do it. Yeah. We're watching baby seals over there on the TV.
Oh,
I'm getting distracted.
Yeah, fully engaged here.
They're rescuing a baby seal.
So we should have that. Actually, I'll be caking that up later today. So
nice.
There we go.
Summer Stout is on tap. For those of you wondering what a Summer Stout is, it's basically we took a stout and stripped out a lot of the big, heavy meatinesses, but it's not necessarily a dry stout like you'd expect, like an Irish-style dry stout. Basically, it's a little bit brighter in flavor.
Yeah. Took a principle of doing a tropical stout, which if you're wondering what that is, go watch that live stream breakdown on Beer of the Week. And yeah, made it lighter. Instead of 8%, it's around 5. Drink it in hot weather, and it's still delicious.
Yum.
Did throw a touch of Sabro in there. Not much to be noticeable, but just a touch to catch a little bit of that fruitiness and coconutiness. Like, push that summer aspect.
Nice. Yeah, it's tasting really good. A lot of people loving it so far. And I think that wraps up our news, which means we get to embarrass Ryan with our Beer of the Week. Bump, bump, bump. Beer of the Week. Yeah!
You ready to join in on this time?
No, I think it's good with you guys.
Yeah, all right.
Whatever.
All right, fine.
we got to get the warm up going for people. So we like to do that because it breaks the this is a rigid, we need to do a live stream. Gets you involved, gets you invested.
I unfortunately watched it online ahead of time, so I knew what I was walking into. How am I going to get out of this?
All right. We'll let you skip it this time. It's okay. Everyone go give Ryan one thumbs down on Instagram on one of his pictures.
Please.
Can you thumbs down an Instagram picture?
No, you cannot.
Just do an emoji or something like that.
Like one of my photos, yeah.
Yeah. Go.
Or just request beer of the week on every new post.
Yes, do it.
Where's the jingle?
All right, and the beer of the week this week is Pastry Stout. Ryan, why don't you go ahead and give us a breakdown on what the Pastry Stout is?
Pastry Stout, I think of it as kind of this new immersion of what was traditionally like the milk stout, but we just kind of took milk stout and blew it up and went crazy with it. So I think of Pastry Stouts as super thick, sweet, stout, and inspired by your favorite dessert or a dessert that you find interesting and you try to put it in liquid form.
Yeah, I like that. Throwing it out there that we took a milk stout and made it extra fancy. Pastry stouts, I've seen anything from, I want to say the first pastry stout that I really had, or the people that to me kind of pioneered or made the style blow up. I want to say it was Southern Tier. Was that the same experience for you? Southern Tier with their like pumpkin, and they had like the creme brulee stout and all those.
Oh yeah,
because those were around like 12 years ago, way before pastry stout was super popular.
They also had a salted caramel porter.
Yeah.
Porter or stout. I think it was porter that was really nice and delicious.
Yeah, those were my kind of entries into. That was before pastry stout was even a word. But yeah, the big sweet beers that kind of remind you of a dessert. Favorite malts to do this? I like where you went with this. You're trying to go not super bitter, right?
Yeah. So they asked for one malt. I cheated and chose two. I like the combo of pale chocolate and chocolate malt, and really just avoiding bitterness at all costs when it comes to these beers. These beers aren't about balance at all. So shooting for that chocolate and that pale chocolate, kind of try and create more of that milk chocolate lane instead of that coffee.
Yeah,
dark.
the more bitter chocolate.
Yeah, that kind of lane.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you even added a hint, and this is a good tip for other people that need to get that extra darkening. Using a debittered dark malt is going to be super helpful too. Those, the Black Princes, the Carafa, dehusked Carafas, your Midnight Wheats, all those debittered malts are going to kind of help you avoid that roast astringency and that extra bitterness. So you can make this big sweet beer that just has all the dark flavor, all the nice chocolate notes, but not the acrid, coffee that's been sitting out for an hour flavors.
Yeah.
I would honestly throw in some chocolate wheat into that too.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Debittered on that, you're getting a little bit more fruitiness out of the wheatness in there, a little bit more puffiness from the grain itself.
Chocolate wheat's a super fun one.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people expect how fruity it is because it's actually a slightly fruity grain.
Yeah, more so than you would expect. Different in fruity than in the Belgian sense. If you're using Special B, you're getting that dark fig and date flavor, maybe even cherry in there. Midnight Wheat gets you a little bit more like actual fruit bowl flavor.
Yeah, and like brightens the beer up a little bit.
Definitely.
You got a lot of Canadas and Washingtons.
Yeah, I saw that. That's awesome.
Yeah. New England, Virginia, Colorado. Ooh, the Netherlands. Who's the farthest away? Netherlands? Minnesota,
I thought
Colorado
I saw
Springs.
Sweden.
Oh, yeah, we got a Sweden. Is Sweden farther than the Netherlands? I think.
Well,
maybe.
The Netherlands.
Maybe a little bit farther.
I don't know.
Trying to picture it on a map. Bremerton, Boise, Phoenix. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We always appreciate you.
Definitely.
Let's go on. Anything else we want to say about the malts? You want to go on to the hops?
Brown malt also, I love that. And a stout as well. That brings in a nice kind of bright in another way. But yeah, I highly recommend Black Prince and Midnight Wheat to get to your color. On your calculator, get to the SRMs that you want in your beer.
Just kind of a color adjustment to make them very stouty.
Yep. Dark color.
Hops. Tim kind of already spilled the beans a little bit here, but
that was not on purpose.
This is a hop we actually talked. It wasn't our hop of the week last week, but we ended up covering it last week too. As just one of those hops that you don't necessarily expect, but can go really good in certain styles. Sabro.
Yeah.
Coconut King.
This is honestly, I think we need to experiment around with it a little bit more, and especially some of these more tannic ones. Was it the HBC 470 that tastes like oak? I might be wrong on that. I think I'm wrong on that number. But there's one out there that tastes oaky and almost a little bit bourbony that's a daughter of Sabro, and I think this is really interesting. I think I didn't add quite enough into the summer stout to get as much coconut as I wanted, and I'm sad about that. I want to add more.
Yeah. I think the bottom line with hops in general with this kind of style is you're looking for hops that might add a character that you're looking for, a fun character, fun flavor in the beer, but don't add anything that's going to, again, steer into that bitterness or, do anything that's going to distract from the fact that you want that pastry sweetness.
Yeah, and it's all about the malt in this beer. It's kind of letting the malt shine. So yeah, I like the Sabro. And then I mentioned too, I had this really good stout a while back that they talked about adding something like Citra into their stout, which at first I was like, that's crazy. It doesn't make sense. But then when you think about it, you're like, okay, it makes sense. It like brightens the beer up. It makes it a lot more pleasant, and it kind of pulls you out of the muddledness of all that dark malt. Yeah. So consider playing around with some more New World hops.
Yeah, so because the total amount that you're going to be using something like that's going to be relatively small. I don't know if we put an IBU range on this one, but you're probably looking 25 to maybe 40 at the most, right?
Yeah, and the malt's going to bring some of that bitterness as well.
Yeah.
Bitterness.
So the small amount of a hop that just might have that flavor that you're looking for that extra brightness, or maybe with the Sabra, the extra coconut, but without actually getting to the point where you're getting anything that's going to be distracting. Yeast of the week. I like where you went with this. We went English style. I think we've used, the last time we did something in this style, I think we used Pub, which is the fuller strain. Do you have a favorite English yeast that you like to use?
I mainly do hazies, so technically I have my favorite English strain, which is Omega OYL 011, which is British 5. I love that. I did not go with that for pastry stout, so for stouts, I like just your standard throwback English yeast. So I did Cellular Science, which is a more beer yeast company. They're English, which I think is the same as Safe Ale4. Which honestly is great. Just kind of make sure you pitch a ton of it. Yeah. Like a lot of it.
Especially if you're going boozy, because you don't want it to slow down and create. Again, would you say that it can get too many esters if you do it wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to make sure that this is going to be a tough beer to make sure that the science and it's a healthy place for your yeast, because you're making a pretty inhospitable environment with all of the things that you're doing to make it a pastry stout, with all those sugars, that thickness, all of that. You're kind of making it a tough world for that yeast. Yeah. So you want to pitch with ton of oxygen. I over pitch, and then keep in mind too that your English yeast are going to throw banana esters, which is pretty normal. And that's something that fades off pretty quickly too. Like even if you just pour it and smell it immediately, you're going to get a ton of banana. Just wait a little bit, and a lot of that banana will kind of blow off.
Go away. Yeah.
And then just with some aging too.
Yeah. And you mentioned how thick it is. So you're talking about the osmotic pressure that's going to be on the yeast, kind of helping it make the whole wort inhospitable. The yeast isn't going to really like that. Let's talk about some things you're doing to kind of up that overall starting gravity, because I know the finishing gravity on these we're expecting at, I'm guessing, 10, 18 on the low end.
Yeah, I mean, my last one, I finished at 1040.
Yeah, I was going to say 1045. Yeah, I've definitely seen some over 1030, over 1040s. Yeah.
Yeah, so typically my understanding of it, I would say I'm on the high side of the finishing gravity. Most places I saw, you're looking your upper 1020s to 1040.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. But that means to get that 7-8% alcohol, your starting gravity is going to be close to 1.1 then, right?
Yeah, 1.1 plus.
Yeah. That's definitely a lot of osmotic pressure on the yeast, and that's why we're talking about doing those really big pitches and doing those, making sure that your yeast is super healthy. But what are we doing to make that mash, that extra thick mash that's not going to be super fermentable?
I think that there's a few different strategies, and again, when I think of pastry stouts, the challenge that I like is, or any beer, is to choose what is a challenge of the beer, like a black IPA. Your challenge is how do you make an IPA black without too much dark malt. So this one's
without getting into the hops way.
Yeah. So this one's I think thickness of it is the cool challenge of it.
3 C's thickness.
Oh yeah, I forgot that style. I was gonna write that way, and I was like, I'm not gonna do that. So either way, so you have your choices of your grain bill, your grain bill, your mash temperature, use of lactose, and the final one that I'm a big fan of is just a long freaking boil. Yeah. Just a classic, boil it off. So the one that we just did, I started with 220 gallons. We did an 8-hour boil, and I dropped down to 165 gallons. So I boiled off a ton of liquid.
25%?
Something like that, yeah.
On
It's
a,
absurd.
On a 7-barrel scale. So, I mean, that's easy for us to think about on like the small scale, the 5-gallon scale. Well, first of all, Michael Russell, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate it. And we have beer. That's my response to that.
No idea what this beer is. Somebody sent it in with no label and a black cap. So it's a stout or a porter.
I'm going to go stout off the top of that. But yeah, on the homebrew scale, a lot of people think about being able to do, high percentage boil offs. But when you're on the steel barrel system downtown, boil off takes a long time because there's not a lot of places for it to escape. You can't put it in a shallow pan or something like that to, exaggerate the boil off rate. So that's impressive on that size.
Definitely.
We also talked about lactose and maltodextrin as well. Have you played around with other non-fermentables that are actually sugars? Because we've used monk fruit sugar. It's kind of something
interesting.
we fell in love with that a couple years ago.
I'm not familiar. What is that?
So it's similar to stevia, and then it's not fermentable, and it's a sweetener. But instead of being how stevia is kind of like medicinal sweet, like medicinal mixed with sugar. Monk fruit is a little bit like earthy or grainier. So I think it blends a lot better in with beer flavors, which is why I like to use it. We stole the idea from when Dogfish Head came out with their first low-cal IPA, because it's also 0 calories. So we started using it for our low-cals, and then ever since, if we ever want to just bump up that sweetness with non-fermentables, we use monk fruit instead of, because I hate the taste of maltodextrin, honestly.
Do you still get the body with, the benefit of malto and lactose is that creamy body? Do you still get that?
I wouldn't say it's as creamy as lactose, but you definitely get some body, some extra head retention. We found that out with because the low-cal IPAs are bone dry.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, that's a fun one.
I would say that it's pretty much an earthy brown sugar is what I get out of it most of the time. You get a really nice big richness like you have brown sugar, but a little bit more earthiness considering it's a plant. I'm gonna go ahead and get that other beer.
I'm not mad at this. It's just very chocolate powdery. It's got like that.
What is this?
It's some kind of stout. There's literally no labeling with it.
I'm gonna say almost too much it's got almost too much like brown malt and chocolate malt. Like the overall roast bill, I would say probably needs to come down. But I think it's got that powdery chocolatiness.
This could be a gentleman did bring us in one that he made a stout out of like 80% chocolate malt.
Oh, that could. Chocolate malt is that classic. Like it makes me feel like I put chalk on my tongue. Like that's how that powderiness comes across to me. My guess is too much chocolate malt, but
it's aggressively tannic and bitter to me.
115 of you guys out there watching right now, please thumbs up us if you would.
Yeah.
Let's move on to some water chemistry. If you want to get another beer, you can. I'm not gonna say no. I'm probably still gonna drink this, but
yeah, go for it. I was also just gonna jump on to the boil the poop out of it. I love boiling beers down to get extra flavor. There's so much goodness that you get out of the Maillard reaction you can get nowhere else. And especially if you're trying to do something like a salted caramel stout or anything caramely sweet, that Maillard, just do it. It'll be so good. Or even taking a portion off and boiling it down into molasses, really thick sugar, and then adding it back in to achieve some of that flavor too.
Yeah, a side boil with a portion of it. We did that with the 1.2 OG, whatever it's going to be that we have fermenting right now. Currently at just under 1.1. So
wow.
It's a 15-point-something% alcohol.
Sorry, I just took me a second to process
1.2.
Yeah, 1.2. It had the potential to reach 25% if we let it.
There's some green pepper in this too, by the way, that I'm thinking probably comes from just a lot. It's got to just be a lot of roasted malt. That's my guess. Too much
coffee was added into it with the too high bitter. They didn't understand how bitter dark malts could be. Over hopped it and maybe added some coffee.
Oh, here's a good question about this pastry stout. Can you bottle condition pastry stout?
I was thinking of talking about that when we talk about carbonation.
So we'll throw that into carbonation. Sorry, water chemistry. Let's get into that because this is.
I had one more thought when you said the 1.2. It reminds me of the yeast part. Like another strategy. I don't know if you two tried this with yours, especially with 1.2, which is absurd, is to hit it with some oxygen during your first 24 hours or so.
We've done up to 3 days. So continuous oxygenation, and we usually aim for no more than 30% sugar depletion from our expected final gravity to kind of cover our risk of oxidation.
Yeah.
But yeah, as long as we don't do it for light beers, but for really big, thick beers, we'll do that, and we'll also incorporate, if we can, a diaphragm pump to keep the beer circulating through the yeast the entire time.
Yeah. That also helps the yeast not settle out, which
We force it to do its job.
We're kind of jumping all over a little
Sorry
bit
about
in here.
that.
No, it's all right. Going back into the yeast, the British strains, when Peter was talking about you don't want him to quit early, there are some British strains that are very notorious of stopping before they're done fermenting. And the Fuller strain or the pub strain, ESB strain, is one of them. So you might need to actually co-pitch or late pitch something else in the end of these beers.
Yeah, so let's go back to the malt of the week. And
So... Yeah, I'm sorry. You just brought something up that was
I was actually thinking this. I was thinking the same thing, doing a co-pitch of like, you got your lazy strain and then your high alcohol strain to finish it off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like looking at the flock too. Like, again, going back to like my hazies, the British 5 like flocks like crazy, so I have to hit it every once in a while and put it back in suspension.
Yeah.
All right, water chemistry. Speaking of hazies, let's talk about what you do for water chemistry to get that extra creaminess. Because a lot of people don't really understand how, we've mentioned this a handful of times on the channel, but how things like chlorides, and we like to use sodium as well, can offer mouthfeel and thickness as well as perceived sweetness in a beer.
I never really thought about it, and then I was like doing a lot of research on pastry stouts, and I heard someone talk about like adding some calcium chloride to the actual beer, and I was like, oh, that makes sense, right? Like for your hazies, you're adding that to add that creaminess, that softness, what we always describe as like pillowy soft like beers. It makes sense in a pastry, right? That you kind of want that soft, like a dessert, a treat is soft and is like delicate. And then so I mirror my hazy water chemistry, but I just back off the gypsum because I'm not looking for that sharp crispness out of the pastry. You still want some of that other elements.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a good starting point, is if you have a water chemistry you like for your hazies, kind of mirror that and then just back off some of the gypsum.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll also add that we like to do sodium for a similar reason, but sodium will it'll lower the flavor threshold, or the energy of activation for flavors to hit your tongue. So if you're going for really intense flavors, sometimes a little bit of sodium can kind of just make you perceive things more intense. And it adds creaminess too. I might sneeze, or I might not.
Vampire.
All
right.
I think I'm good.
All right.
So yeah, getting flavor into it. This is the part that makes a pastry stout really a pastry stout. When you get into, you've made the beer, you've got the sweetness, you've got the water chemistry, you've got that base beer that you want, but then you want to make it taste like whatever pastry you're thinking of. So let's talk about what strategies we use to actually get that flavor in there.
Like, let's be real. Like, we all have these dreams of like, I'm putting graham cracker in the mash, it's gonna come through.
Yeah.
But like, at the end of the day, that it doesn't come through. You should do it to say you did it.
So you've got the real flavors in there.
Yeah, but you're gonna need to like make your own. The nice thing on the homebrew scale is you can do your own tinctures. You can make your own concentrates, but you're gonna want to invest in some good like extracts. And you can choose your favorite retailer for that.
Don't be ashamed. Just get that. I mean, we use Vanilla for pretty much every. They've got amazing flavors.
Yeah. Olive Nation also has, again, TTB approved stuff.
Yeah.
They have some really good flavors, and then some flavors are like, all right, this is.
I need to reach back out to them and do some more. Olive Nation sent us like a free handful of flavors for one of the videos we did.
Their Georgia peach one was so good.
Or Benilla's, I think, chocolate. I actually like their chocolate better than Amaretti's chocolate.
Yeah.
Like, I was surprised, but I love it.
I haven't really had a successful Amaretti beer that I've made. I don't know if that's just me, but because I think about good beers that other people have made with Amaretti, but for whatever reason, whenever we've done it, it's added. Maybe we go overboard, but it always tasted too fake for us. The Vanilla has always tasted the most natural.
I would say, although the one that I've worked with, Vanilla is, well, for most of their flavors, less intense than other flavorings. And I think that might be one reason why it's easier for us to work with, because we can fine tune it a little bit more. Or go willy-nilly and add a half a bottle of strawberry flavoring into something, and it comes out as a tasty milkshake IPA.
Yeah.
The price point's great too.
Oh yeah.
And like thinking about like chocolate specifically, I would argue almost every pastry stout is a chocolate base of some sort. When you're thinking of adding chocolate I like to think of chocolate additions kind of the same as my malt additions. You're gonna bring some bitterness, no matter what form of chocolate you get, whether it's cocoa nibs, cholacca. Cholacca is like pretty bitter, actually.
Yeah, I almost don't. I mean, I like cholacca once it settles out because I think some of the bitterness does drop.
Yeah.
But it's been hard for me to use good cholacca.
So like, think about the bitterness that you're adding when you add chocolate, like actual chocolate, to your beer. And again, trying to stray away from bitterness as much as possible.
No.
In yours, or adjust your grain bill knowing you're adding the chocolate and you're going to get bitterness from that.
Yeah.
So being conscious of that.
And you got a good point in here about kind of balancing that bitterness with sweetness. Using vanilla across the board is going to add that perceived sweetness. And a lot of times when your brain is thinking sweet, it does kind of help balance out that bitterness too.
Yeah.
100%. I think vanilla is probably, and using different types of vanilla is probably an actual like necessity on Pastry Stout. And I mean different types, whether you're using the Madagascar bourbon vanilla or Tahitian vanilla or Mexican vanilla or a vanilla blend. They do taste different. They add different things, you know, so some of them can be a little bit more floral or a little bit more robust and woody.
Yeah.
But you can't make good chocolate without vanilla. It really boosts those sweet flavors. It's like salt. It's a flavor enhancer most of the time.
Martes, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate it. What grains would you recommend for your first all-grain stout recipe? So I'm going to go off the beaten path on this, and I'm going to say 12 pounds of Halcyon malt and 0.75 pounds of Carafa 3.
Interesting.
I'm saying that because Halcyon's a delicious base malt, and then you really know what those two malts are giving you. It's the most basic stout you can make, but it's still going to be tasty, and it limits you from going too crazy. That's going to be mine. You guys want to throw some
I'll add
thoughts?
to that. Add British yeast, probably in a SO4 pub strain will be really nice for that. And then hops like Magnum or Warrior. Very indistinct hops. They give you really not a whole lot of, distinct flavors coming out of it. Just a little bit of bitterness. And so you can really learn what those malts are doing for you.
I'm a big fan of Maris Otter for like in stouts. Like Maris Otter is a great base malt. And then a little goes a long way with the chocolate, with all of your dark things. Like I would say that's the most common error in early home brewing, all grain, is like chocolate's going to taste like chocolate. Chocolate malt does not straight up taste like chocolate.
It adds to the chocolate thought in your brain when you've got malt sweetness backing it up. But if you do a ton of chocolate malt, like I said with that, tons of chocolate malt to me tastes like I'm coating my mouth with chalk. It's very powdery.
So you were a kid and you thought the Hershey's baking chocolate powder was going to be really tasty and you were going to get a candy bar. So you grab a spoon and get in a mouthful. Yeah. That right there.
But yeah, that's mine. Do you have any other things that you like to do for your stouts? First all-grain stout. Any recommendations? Besides Maris Otter?
Maris Otter, the Midnight Wheat or Black Prince. Again, that's how you get your color. Don't try to achieve your color through your chocolate malts, your other malts.
Black malt, roasted barley.
Just do your debittered black malts. That's how you get your color. And then chocolate. Oh, I like a touch of coffee malt. So that was like one of the biggest shifts in like my early stouts was I did all chocolate malt and then I add just a touch of coffee and like the stout just got so much better. Like balances it out like really nicely.
Because coffee's a pseudo crystal, so it's got a little bit of that, it's kind of bridging the gaps into the roast world. It's technically a roast malt, but it also has a small moisture content going into the kilning process, and so you get a small amount of caramelized sugars in there, not like a crystal malt, but it gives you flavors. I think it actually adds a little bit of extra Maillard. Is kind of where they get the coffee from. But it gives you a lot of flavors that kind of bridge those chocolate malts to your base malts.
I mean, in the coffee malts, I would probably say a lot of the special malts, Special X, Special Roast, Special B, would be good in stouts too.
But for your first one, keep it simple.
Yeah. For your first one, go with like his recipe.
Yeah, pick like 3 grains.
Yeah. And that'll be good. I would throw Chevalier as a great base malt too, because you're getting that nice,
that one's naturally like amber by itself as a base malt.
Oh yeah, but that extra.
Thank you, Marte. We appreciate it.
The biscuitiness. Love me some biscuits.
Yeah.
Don't put Victory in it.
That's true.
I'm a big fan of caramel malts, personally.
See, Like, we're not alone in this.
Oh, is
Yeah.
this a thing? Okay.
Yeah, it's a
That's
thing.
good.
Oh
I'm glad
yeah,
I'm not alone.
we're gonna
Yeah.
get attacked with making stouts with 100% crystal malts now in the comments.
I still didn't print off that bingo. Dang it.
No, dang it, you should have. All right, so carbonation. We're gonna answer a question: can you carbonate these in bottles, as well as some other things in here? Carbonation on these beers is a challenge because they're so thick. There's so much stuff in it. It does not carbonate the same way that other beers do. So, what do you do when you're carbonating your beer?
So
You going for the other one?
I'll let you two speak to like doing bottle conditioning. I would assume that you can. My only concern with like bottle conditioning or carbonating in the bottle is that that yeast has already been through like a life. Like it's gone through some things, and you're asking it to also chomp through some more sugar again. So I'm curious about the bottle conditioning, what that would be like. But we can speak to that in a minute, I guess. So with really thick beers, your perception of carbonation is going to be thrown off. So if you carb it up to your standard like 2.3, 2.5 or whatever it might be, your perception of the carbonation is going to be lower because of the thickness of it and all of that. So a good trick if you want to be perceived as proper carbonation, you should actually overshoot your carbonation. You should actually overcarb it a little bit, just because of the mouthfeel and the thickness of it.
Yeah.
People perceive it as less carb.
The beer holds on to the CO2 better in these bigger, thicker beers than it does in smaller, lighter beers. And so it's actually one of the things, that we noticed with our Belgian Strong Dark.
white
It
stout.
finished out at
what?
1030.
White stout.
And it almost looks like it has no carbonation on it, even though it's carved to the 2.4, 2.5 volumes that we serve every other beer on tap here. Or our Grisette, the CO2 breakout happens so fast, it's almost impossible to pour a full glass of that thing because there's almost no sugars. I think that finished out at 1.005. Wow. So it definitely, that big thickness holds on to the CO2 better. So it feels like there's less carbonation than there normally does.
Yeah. And like in some of the thick ones, like I can see like the bubble fighting its way to the surface and just kind of all of that.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. It is sexy when you have a glass that looks like it's not even carbonated, and then a couple seconds later, just this beautiful head rises up to the top. Oh man, personally for myself in pastry stouts, I kind of expect and I enjoy not having as much carbonation in there.
That's like another choice you have to make. Is I lean on that side too. Same with. I always throw it back to hazies, but same with hazies too. Is like I think that there is a benefit to that lower carbonation.
Nitro hazies.
Oh man, yes.
What is that? Or I would like to try that.
Yeah.
We have
So we're gonna put in a nitro tap.
Yeah, we can. I have nitrous oxide. You want to put nitrous oxide in hazies?
All right.
That'd be fun. Nitrous oxide actually isomerizes into something that perceives as a sugar on your tongue. So nitrous oxide has similar qualities to nitrogen. It's a little bit more soluble because of how the bonds work, but it is it also sweetens up beer. On to the bottle conditioning question. You guys probably already talked about. I wasn't listening because I was grabbing some beer. You guys probably already talked about how the yeast has basically already been put through a lot, and it's going to be not very good at doing its job in the bottle. One thing that I would say for what are they doing? Are they C-sectioning that dolphin? If it's adding an actual bottle conditioning yeast like the CBC. Lalaman yeast or whatever. I forget what the number is in Fermentus, but Fermentus has a bottle conditioning yeast too. But those are yeasts that are actually designed to be super hardy, very alcohol tolerant, and good at handling difference in osmotic pressure. So adding one of those is probably the best way to do it if you're doing a pastry style stout bottle conditioned.
I would also say that if you're bottle conditioning, know your beer extremely well and how it's going to finish, or be on top of it, because you are finishing pretty high with these beers. There's still a lot of residual sugar left over, so you have a big possibility to create bottle bombs or gushers with this.
Forgot about that part. Yeah, with all that leftover.
Especially if it's going to be a beer that ages, for an extended amount of time in a cellar and not in a cold space. I mean, if you're aging it in a refrigerator, whatever. I mean, the bottle conditioning yeast are not really going to add that much extra to it. But if you're doing it in a cellar, be careful of this. Know where it's going, or purposefully stop your yeast and then cellar it.
Here's a good question. How do you reintroduce dry yeast on bottling day? The best way to do it is actually rehydrate your yeast in the same or with the same solution that you're going to be adding your sugar content for bottle conditioning. So you rehydrate your yeast and then you add in your sugar mixture. So you might end up with a total of like 4 cups of water total going into your batch for a 5-gallon batch. But mix that together in one big slurry and then transfer all that into your whatever you're bottling on and make sure it's well mixed in.
Yeah. All right, carbonation on this. We have that on here. We mentioned that we like them a little bit lower, but actually higher carbonating these beers. You have a good point that you added on here. It adds, when you have higher carbonation because of the extra thickness and creaminess, it can actually add to more of like a milkshake-like flavor in there. It can add to that creamy body mouthfeel to it. I like that. I like that idea too for some of these.
So yeah, that's something to play around with. I guess if you're doing bottling condition, that's an easy experiment to do. Is take a handful and test out different carbonation levels.
Yeah, a little bit more sugar in a couple of them.
Yeah,
that'd be easy. And yeah, just you could take a dropper of sugar solution and just add to 2 or 3 bottles higher carb.
Or I guess even keg condition or in the keg, like just. I mean, my keg beer as a home brewer, I never waited for it to carb.
That's true,
You just have it slowly carbon kegging full samples and see at what point are you happiest about
Throw it on at like 18 PSI and try it like twice a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds delicious.
Until it's where you like it.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's it for our beer of the week. So let's go on and move ahead to our topic number 1.
Well, I'm going to go on this. Nitro IPAs, like for you guys out there, try it. Reverend KY got on here, said that he's done it. In all honesty, I absolutely love Nitro. I prefer a cask
for
IPA.
For a hazy, then or like I guess an English style, but for a West Coast style, I'll slap you.
No, I enjoy it. I enjoy it so much. My favorite is Bear Republic's Racer 5 on cask. Like, it is stupidly incredible. All right, so Nitro to me is trying to replicate cask, so it's not just necessarily taking one of your beers and doing Nitro instead of CO2. For myself, it's setting it up to replicate those cask flavors, and I absolutely and utterly love pale ales and IPAs on Nitros. I don't think they're done enough, and I think more people need to do it.
All right, High Horse Bingo checked off. Or Tim ran? I forget what it was on the bingo card.
It's Stan's Soapbox.
There we go, Stan's Soapbox. So, yeah. Jumping on to, actually, do you want to jump into this beer first and talk about it a little bit before we...
Oh, yeah, let's do it. So, white stout on it. We have, MFB? I forget who gave this to us. He also gave us the cilantro gosa that was incredible.
That was tasty. On this one, I'm going to say immediately on the nose, I get green pepper and a little bit of like almost an acetone kind of flavor, which to me might suggest that, however, some of the infusion ingredients happened. Either if it was coffee, there's obviously coffee in this, but the coffee might have been on there for a little bit too long. Also, there's a chance, especially with having it been shipped here, that something happened in transit that might have got it a little bit infected from maybe one of the infusion ingredients. Because there is like a little bit of an acetone flavor as well, and the color kind of suggests that something might have re-fermented.
Yeah, I want to say it's coffee, but the coffee components that I'm getting from this are still really nice and smooth and delicious.
The coffee that's in there is there's some good coffee flavor.
So if you put your beer on coffee for too long, it's going to taste like green bell peppers.
Yeah.
That's kind of that green vegetal flavor that a lot of people talk about. That's why we like to do like 24 hours on max on your beans, unless you're infusing it a different way, say through cold brew or in the boil. Cold brew and the boil especially creates bitter flavors. That's the weakest form to do it. Cold brew is the most controllable, but you can still get some of those harsh flavors coming out of it. So we like the dry bean.
No. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I notoriously associate green peppers with coffee, and beer aromas, there's always, and it ages out that way too. So coffee beers, you can tell if they're older if they smell like jalapenos to me, or that.
Yeah, I get jalapenos. Yeah, I'm like slightly cooked jalapenos.
And so that was like the distracting thing at first, and then once you peel past that layer, there's some I'm guessing they aged it on chocolate. It feels like you added chocolate in fermentation or something. Yeah, it's
Yeah, there's some, and part of it might have been just, I have no idea how long it's been in the fridge. Part of it might have just been the amount of time that it's spent in our fridge.
Yeah.
That's our bad for not getting to it super fast.
The shipping process, because the beers are sitting on their side, could have gotten some oxidation going on in there, or kicked up some re-fermentation that shouldn't have happened. So I'm liking this. Rowan, acetone isn't that bad. You're getting it in West Mall. West Mall is a very different beer than this, though. Acetone in certain proportions in certain beers is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's generally coming with some more funky flavors. And I would say anywhere just above the flavor threshold is probably a bad thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And guys playing with a dolphin.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right.
Overall, there's a lot of good flavors in this. I like the coffee that was used. I think the coffee that was used is probably either a fresh roasted coffee, because I can get a little bit of oiliness on the palate from the coffee, or from something else. If it was, if you use nibs or something like that, that can have some oiliness as well. And there's a little bit of sharpness that I'm guessing is why you associate the coffee as well.
Yeah.
Overall, there's a lot of good flavors in there. There's just that one immediate nosedive into there was a little bit of distracting from the coffee, green pepper, jalapeno note.
I would definitely like to try this fresh.
Yeah. I'd like a smidge more body, but that's about it.
Yeah, I can
but
see
I'm
a
also
little
weird about body and stouts.
A little bit of sweetness, I think, probably could have helped, push forward some flavors. But part of that could have been on us on how long we aged it too, or how long it was sitting.
Daniel, you have it partially right. You can blame us for how long we stored it. Not how we stored it, but how long we stored it. We always store it proper, and we always serve it in proper glasses. But there's no question about how long.
If it was in proper storage, then blame like UPS or whoever shipped it to us.
That's right.
That's where it came from.
Topic
number one: competitions can help you in a home brewer. Competitions. Homebrewing competitions is something that I did quite a bit just with my local club when I was first getting into homebrewing a long time ago. How long was it? I was 20, so 12 years ago. Our local club was a lot of college graduates and professors and stuff like that met at the brewery, and we, all kind of organized BJCP studies and like let's brew within a style, those kind of competitions. I did never send off to like a major competition, but you did a decent amount of that.
That
right?
was like pretty much all of my home brewing. I got into it when I lived in Missouri after living in San Diego, and I had like IPAs out there, and I was like, hey. These aren't what I'm used to. So I got into home brewing because of like wanting that West Coast style. Mm-hmm. And then the competitions just popped up, and I did like one, and you got the feedback, and you're like, screw you, like this beer is good. And then there was another comment that you're like, oh, okay, like that's nice. And so you kind of like, let's go at it again. Like, let's see, and like, let's get into it. So like I would enter a competition like every other month at least. As often, and I would drive and drop off the beers, and they range from your home brew club ones, which are great. Those are like competition amongst friends, to your BJCP like certified like statewide ones as well. I think that doing the competitions is one, you just have a lot of beer. The more you brew, you're like, I got 2 extra bottles. Like they send you bottles, so you're like, might as well just let's see what this person has to say about my beer. So I thought it was super useful to get that feedback and to have that purpose of brewing besides just like making beer to drink. It's like another challenge.
Even looking back at when I was first in the homebrew club, and because we did BJCP training, we had like a weekly meeting where we'd be like, all right, now we're going over this style. We've all tried to brew this style a month ago. Let's do the BJCP breakdown. Let's memorize all the parameters. And this was in the 2008 BJCP style guidelines, which made me really pissed when I moved up here and then they changed the guidelines and now I don't know anything.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of time for about 2 years just learning all these, and a lot of the competitions that I did were really good because they kind of forced me into recognizing style guidelines, which I don't necessarily think I have to brew within now.
Yeah.
But having known those when I was doing all that studying, I think really helped me hone in my technique and hone in how I have to brew, or what I need to do to get the flavors that I want.
Should we also like take a step back and say what BJCP is? I'm guessing most people know like what it is.
It's basically the guidelines that people judge beer on. If you don't know, that's the rule
Beer
book.
Judge Certification Program. Most people probably do, but we probably are skipping over a lot of people that don't know, especially on the podcast. So
yeah.
BJCP, there's a lot of we do this a lot. We just assume everybody knows what we're talking about by now.
You should.
I mean, it's awesome. Definitely Google it. Like, I have the app on my phone.
I do too.
Yeah.
It's useful. And yeah, that's like one of the comments that I said too, is like, even if you don't want to enter competitions, every homebrewer should have that app, and you should just look at it. And
It's a challenge not to say something now.
what?
No, the people like to play bingo with us because
Oh.
we do certain things, and they're looking for something, and one of them has already been mentioned, but apparently they missed it, and the other one, like, now do I say it? Do I slip it in, slowly?
Is this like,
If you ask
I'm
my
gonna see if
wife,
I-
slowly. But
Let's see if I can pull
anyway.
up the. Continue. I'm going to try to pull up the bingo for you.
Yeah, BJCP guidelines on that. They're really nice. Like Peter was saying, when you're doing brewing, you shouldn't be constrained by these things. I mean, it's a guideline. Yeah. It guides you towards something. It's not an end-all, be-all. But you should understand where a lot of these things are coming from.
and knowing
in
the history of
BJCP.
styles, like, it can be
Yeah.
inspirational. And like, I'm gonna look at this. I just have this one thought that I'm gonna
No,
forget
do it.
otherwise.
Do it.
Is I'll hear people, and like I said this too early on, was like, oh, I don't want to like brew like within these parameters, and
Yeah.
like I don't want to be restrained by it. And like, I'm for that. You should brew whatever the heck you want to brew, and then reverse engineer it. So instead of being like, oh, I'm gonna brew a brown ale, just brew whatever sounds good to you, and then go through have it, drink your beer, process your beer, think about your beer, and then go through the guidelines and be like, I wonder what category this best fits into.
That's a good way to do it, and it's a good way to like learn categories and learn how to, how to stylize your beer is one way to put it. But also, it's a good way to get ideas for how you might brew next time. Because there's a lot of guidelines. You're like, this is almost in this category. Do I want more of that flavor, or do I want more of a different flavor? If you're trying to. Jake, thank you so much. Slip it in slowly.
Adam, you also spelled that wrong. It is ascorbix. Ascorbix prevents
ASS.
oxidation.
Yeah.
Not ascorbs.
Ascorbs was the first block I wrote. Countries was one of the last because I was running out of ideas.
All right. But yeah, also starting from the history of a beer and like, how do I create this beer? Knowing the history in the BJCP can really help you do things. Like Gosas, Gosas are starting to get inappropriately salty. And when you look at where they came from in Goslar, their water is salty, but it's not that noticeably salty. It has that higher sodium content to it, but it's not, oh my gosh, yeah, I just put a handful of salt in this. Or Dortmunder. Dortmunder, that's a hard style to replicate, and I don't honestly really think you can without knowing the history and where it comes from, because it's basically a hard water Pilsner that's a little bit darker.
And so many times I've been like making a beer like, I created a new style or something, and then you like get into it, you're like, no. I mean, people have been brewing for a long time, and people have had lots of crazy ideas, and like rarely are we the first one to do it. So that's like a fun like thing, and then you do get inspired with looking at the history of the beer, and then choose the right category for competitions. That is like my biggest piece of advice. If you're going to do competitions, and then if you want to win, be strategic about the categories that you choose. So everyone's going to submit an IPA. Like, I always submit an IPA too, because you're like, you want that prestige of winning the IPA category. But choose some of the lesser known categories. Choose some of the less kind of popular categories, and you're just competing against less people, so your odds get a lot better.
One of my friends won the NHC in the Doppelbock category.
Yeah, that's a great. I mean, they might make a great Doppelbock and love Doppelbocks.
They do, yeah, but I mean, it's also it's not an IPA. It's not like a what are the so IPA is obviously the most common. Do we say like ambers and stuff like that fall into the similar, like pretty common?
Yeah, I would say IPA is the top category. Probably your stouts and your porters maybe are next. I don't know what would be next. Oh yeah.
I'm sure it's changed a lot in the last 5 years.
Definitely.
Well, hazy IPA is now the most submitted. Which actually, like, if you think about competition, doing your dark beers that are less susceptible to oxidation or like don't break down the same way from oxidation is another strategy to be like thoughtful of like your judges aren't going to be drinking the beer like within that day that you drop it off.
Yeah.
So if you don't have the controls and you're doing like bottle conditioning and all that, thinking about what categories stand up and will hang out a little bit longer.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. I mean, if you're sending your beer to a competition that's 300 miles away from you, hazy IPA probably isn't the best thing to send because you don't know how that's going to go. You don't know how it's going to be stored, and there's a great chance of it oxidizing and you're going to lose.
There's a lot of people that'll do those kind of styles because they're quick to turn around as well. But I would say doing a style that you have to plan ahead a lot for, or that you have because you've already made a beer that ages really well. You mentioned triple in there, and I think that's a great one because it's one that's just going to get better with time, and it's going to be really shipping friendly.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a great strategy.
Yeah.
And I guess my last piece of advice is don't be scared to change your category. Meaning that I went to brew a brown ale, and then I'm like tasting, I'm like, you know what? This tastes closer to like a porter. So submit it as a porter. Like, don't be married to...
In 2008, there's a category called brown porter.
Oh, yeah.
There's not anymore.
Which is a real historical style.
It
Tatty
is.
porter, and they're stupidly delicious. Like, why would you get rid of that? People.
Changing the stuff on us.
Yeah.
All right, we go into the benefits of the feedback part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you submit, especially if you're submitting to a BJCP regulated competition, you're going to get probably some harsher criticism than you think. For those of you who don't know, BJCP competitions are scored out of 50, and a lot of your first beers, especially if you're a newer home brewer, a lot of your beers will probably fall between 28 and 35. And that can hurt. That's not going to look good to you when you get it back. But that feedback will be pretty consistent if there's any sort of off flavors. Any beer that's over, I would say a 38 is an amazing beer. It's a really good beer. So if the highest you get is a 35, don't feel like you're really far off from doing really good stuff.
Yeah. I was going to say a good feedback. A good thing about this feedback is it's not from somebody you know. Like,
Yeah.
that is a big thing. I mean, how many friends do we have that are like, this is the best thing ever? And you're like, really? I'm pretty sure that's vinegar, not beer.
Yeah.
So I don't know where your taste buds are. But also, I mean, I've seen some local brewers get trapped into it, and they think that they're making stupidly incredible beer just because all their friends
'Cause they're in a
drink
bubble.
it and love it. And all their friends are drinking and loving it because it's free, and their friend made it. You know?
Yeah. And like, if you haven't done competition a little bit, just like behind like the structure of it is your beer is served on a flight, and they tell you where you are in the flight, so that the judge will get 5 beers in front of them, and they'll tell you which number you are in that flight, which was going to affect their opinion. And then you typically, a standard competition, you'll get feedback from 3 different judges. So 3 judges will have your beer in the same spot in the flight, and so you get to triangulate too. So like one judge will be like, no hop aroma, blah blah blah, and then the next judge is like, really like the hop aroma in this, like super dank, and you're like, all right, well,
Where am I at? Yeah.
So I call that, I'll chalk that up to a win-ish situation that you're like, okay, like it's perception. At the end of the day, it is subjective. So take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Adam Chumbley, thank you so much for the super chat. And I am excited to try that steam beer that you say is a product of the Genus Brewing School.
Yeah. And just what you're saying on there, somebody just mentioned that scores vary from competition to competition. And that is 100% true. We all have individual palates. BJCP does try to take an opinion out of it, but you know, everybody can taste something different.
Yeah, you're dealing with humans here. You know, if one of them brushed their teeth too aggressively that morning, they're going to give you a different score than if they didn't brush their teeth at all. You know, it's a lot of variables that go into it, which is why that 3-judge system is really good.
Yeah, but beyond that, you are getting a supposedly trained palate to give you feedback on this. So even though if it's a little bit more subjective, it's still a pretty good reference to what's going on. And just taking that information going, okay, well, they thought it was higher than the hoppy range, but I love this, so I don't care about that part. But they also said that it was a high grassy note, and I'm not going for that, so I need to change it.
And I just saw had a comment of like, yeah, you're asking your friends, but your friends, like, we're going to talk about like off flavors too. Your friends aren't trained in the language to help you. So judges often will give you feedback of like, oh, it's like I'm picking up on like diacetyl or something. Like we recommend like adjusting your fermentation. Like they're like, or it seems like you have fermentation issues or contamination issues, and the judges they're better at that. And with that said, you should look for opportunities to be a judge too. And you should look at joining the BJCP program. And it's a community, so you're getting feedback from them, but you also should look for your opportunities to be a judge, and that'll make you a better beer brewer.
Yeah. Or even just if you're judging with your friends that have that sort of training as well. Judging beers blindly and then coming together with notes basically is a really good kind of training exercise to get your palate elevated. There's a lot of times where, I was judging with 4 or 5 or 6 different guys doing competitions, and not all of them had done BJCP training, but we'd all write our notes without talking to each other, and then we'd come back and talk about what notes we wrote, and so we'd have our independent scores, and then we'd learn from what other people were tasting, or they'd learn from what I was tasting, and we'd kind of be like, oh, you tasted that? Well, this is the word for that. And so it was good kind of cross-education for everybody.
That's like one of my favorite things. I had my homebrew buddy that we just always did the blind tastings and always drank beer separately first, wrote our notes, and then talked about it.
Taking out the personal factor really helps in getting feedback on this. Even if you're kind of mean and going to hurt your friends' feelings, generally you're not picking everything out on there. A judge, they're literally, you are a piece of paper and a beer in front of them. That's as far as they care about you, which can be really nice. But again, not taking it personally and just taking it all of this stuff as, hey, this is where I can improve my beers, or going, this might be out of style for that, but I really love it, so I don't care.
Reverend KY have made some subpar beers that the island, he's a brewer on Woodby Island, that island folk are loving, and it makes his heart bleed inside. We know the feeling. That's happened to us. We've been like, I don't want this beer on tap, and then one of the kids that works here will put it on tap and be like, everyone was loving that beer, and I'll be like,
That literally just happened. It was a keg that was left out in front so I could dump it later that day, and it ended up on tap the night before, and we sold a lot of it, and people really loved it.
A couple of our regulars, that became their beer, so it went fast, which was good, and I'm glad it mostly went to them because they're regulars, and but it's still one of those things. It's like, I hope that fresh person isn't coming to Genus for the first time and being like, oh, what kind of pale ales do you have? And we're like, we've got this one. No, that's not the way you want to put not the foot you want to put forward,
And the judges usually aren't telling you something you don't probably already know, in the sense of
hopefully,
it's just confirming. You're like, I feel like it, but you question yourself. You're like, is it just me or is it someone else? And so more or less, I found that the judges picking up on stuff that you're already I see that. Yeah,
or you can get your score back and then do it in reverse, where you taste your beer again after you get the feedback, and then you're like, oh yeah, I can taste that.
Yeah.
So either one of those two scenarios could be a really good educational piece.
Especially on the point that we all taste things different, and you may, I really don't taste diacetyl very well. In all honesty, a lot of people would be like, oh, this is buttered popcorn, and they're like, I don't get that. My flavor threshold for that is much higher than most people, versus off flavors and sours. My flavor threshold is super low for that, and I will refuse to drink some sours because they taste like barf, even though they might be some of the more popular ones on the market and nobody else can get it. So being able to have that come back to you, and a judge being able to tell you, oh yeah, this is actually in there, can help train your palate better to identify those things, so in case you are missing it.
Esteban Flemos, cheers. I am listening to you guys while preparing for a summer brewing schedule I teach, and we are going into our last week. Well, congratulations on finishing out the school year. I'm sure that was not an easy school year to get through, so good on you. And yeah, I'm excited to hear what you're out there making, and I appreciate the super chat.
That's an interesting idea.
Definitely.
Do Survey Monkey with all your friends.
Oh, there you go.
Cool concept.
Yeah, that's nice. See if you can get at least use numbers to your advantage. How would one get the feedback? Take the feedback and adjust the recipe. Do you want to enter a couple of comps or start changing stuff if the score is too low? I would always take feedback with a grain of salt, but I would also, I would temper the feedback with your own palate. And if you love the beer you're making and whatever is an off flavor to somebody else you like, you don't need to stray too far, but use the advice to make adjustments and see if those adjustments can make you like your beer better or not.
Yeah, and it is subjective at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And like another thing that I like mentioned and I thought about is like becoming nose blind, I call it. But like breweries suffer from this too. Like a place like New Belgium, you get like a 6-pack every day you work.
Yeah.
And so breweries are facing this challenge of their employees, the main beer, the only beer they drink all the time is their own beer. And so what happens is you become trained to think this is what IPA is, instead of tasting a bunch of different things. So if you're drinking your own homebrew all the time, you kind of shift your perception of what the beer should be, and it becomes like, this is what IPA is.
Yeah.
So kind of being aware and forcing yourself to go out or hear feedback from other people.
There's been some beers on tap here that I didn't like at the beginning of it, but then I kind of just forced myself to drink it because I wanted it off tap. And then by the end of it, I was really good at drinking that beer.
Yeah. It's amazing how your palate kind of
shifts for you. Yeah, but you want to stay on top of it, and it does. You mentioned with downloading the BJCP app and trying to go through styles and trying to analyze your beers through those styles. But the same thing goes with potential off flavors, which we're about to get into. It's important that you kind of reset your palate and know what you're trying to not hit. Because you can become nose blind or palate blind to a lot of these things. And so even though sometimes it does make it feel like work, and there's a lot of times I want to shut my palate off and just drink. Yeah. Sometimes you got to, especially if you're in the industry or trying to become a better brewer, you do have to actively make sure that you're not falling into that trap.
So going into off flavors, there's actually a good lead-in question to this. Joel, did we specifically train for tasting, or did we learn this along the way? A little bit of both.
That's a deep question. That's a good one.
Like, learning along the way can be specifically training for it, and the way that I actually learned it was from the wine industry, and it's drinking a lot of bad product.
Yes.
When you know something is bad in a specific way, drinking a lot of it to train your brain into identifying that specific off flavor so you can taste it and other things. But that also works in the reverse. I mean, if you find the perfect Pilsner out there, drinking a lot of it to identify all of the specific flavor compounds in there that makes it that perfect in relevance to the brewing process.
So what Tim is saying is you just need to drink a lot.
Yeah. With intention.
With intention. Exactly that. With intention. You need to specifically identify what you're looking for. It is training. It really is,
Yeah. And just, put in the time. But I think it's fun. And again, when we made work of it, I always had a piece of paper and take the time to write it down.
Yeah.
Force yourself when you smell it. I have a hard time teasing apart tropical aromas, but force yourself to be follow-up question, be oh, it's fruity, and then you should be
what fruit?
Fruits? Yeah. And this is malty, but what malts are you specifically referring to? And so trying to go that second layer, and that's a training. I think you're naturally good at picking up fruity.
Yeah.
But going that next layer is a good way to challenge yourself.
And if, like I said, bouncing an idea off a friend in the same way, if you have somebody that you want to write down those specifics separately and then get into, comparing notes, that's a good way to kind of affirm, or if you're second guessing whether or not something's there and they don't taste it, maybe you're tasting something wrong. So kind of affirm or disaffirm, I'm going to say that's a word, kind of those notions. So let's talk about some common off flavors that are going to be you might get as a home brewer, and talk about how to get rid of them. Let's start with diacetyl, because I think a lot of people know what diacetyl is, and I'll throw pentane dione in there too. There's two VDKs. But
hang on, don't go too far. Somebody says we lost the sound.
Did we lose the sound?
Did we lose the sound?
I'm skeptical. I don't think we lost the sound.
All right, fine.
Did anyone else say we lost sound?
Only one person. All right, we're moving on then. Learn to lip read.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Hi, wife.
All right.
So diacetyl is a common flavor that it's a natural byproduct of actual certain yeast fermentation. Not all yeast produce diacetyl in their metabolic pathway, at least not to a flavor threshold extent. But there are yeasts that specifically have to go through the diacetyl process before reducing to acetaldehyde, which then gets reoxidized to alcohol, something like that. And so it can be left in your beer if you don't do certain stuffs.
Diacetyl. I've heard some people say diacetyl.
Yeah, they're both technically correct.
Oh, cool. I'm right. Did we say it's butter? It's
Go get Jake's hazy IPA. He told us to open it.
All right.
Yeah, I want to try a hazy for sure.
Yeah.
And it's Jake's. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Jake.
So like buttered movie popcorn is like the quintessential, but something interesting that I didn't learn until I got into the tasting process is diacetyl is one of the few off flavors that actually has a texture component associated with the aroma and flavor. So yeah, you get this like slick feeling on your tongue of like, yeah, it's like it coats your tongue or your mouth with kind of this film or this slick feeling. So that's another easy way to pick up diacetyl.
I'm not super good at tasting it, but I can usually tell when it's in there.
Yeah, from texture.
Because of the mouth.
And that's one of the classic ones like you're referring to that I think that you have the most range and people's threshold for picking it up. A lot of people are pretty not sensitive to diacetyl, and then there's some people that are gnarly sensitive to it. And then once you pick up on it and you notice it, I'm gonna be honest, like doing off-flavored training and stuff kind of ruins beer for a bit. Like, like it makes it tough to go out for a beer, not because you're thinking about it, but it's like once your brain puts that connection with like butter and diacetyl.
I thought it was a 22. Jake, what's it look like? Yeah, it is really tough. Somebody mentioned that before, and that when you're doing this, turning off your analytical brain to enjoy beer again is not easy. It's always one of those things. I normally struggle with it, and that the first few sips and drinks that I'm taking of almost any beer,
Tell us if it's this.
I'm actually analyzing it, I'm judging it, I'm trying to break it down and figure out, and it normally takes me a minute to actually revert back into that actual, hey, I just need to drink this.
Yeah.
But that is one of those things. I will say I don't taste it very well at all. I worked with a guy in the industry, his name's Matty Smith, awesome dude. He was insane. He could look at a beer and almost taste it in there. And we get beers on at the growler house I worked at, and he'd be like, "Oh man, that's just full of butter. I can't taste it." And I'm over here on my third pint going, "What are you talking about, man? This is so nice and smooth."
I don't know. I'm like jealous of people that don't pick it up at times. As a brewer, I'm like happy I pick up on it at relative level, but
he taped a piece of paper to both bottles. It might be on the right-hand side next to Weiser's.
Okay.
Another
jump into this one in the meantime. It's
strategy
crispy boys.
With thinking about your threshold is get an off-flavor kit. I don't know if you guys sell one. I know you can get it off of Yakima has a hop aroma one. I just bought one from More Beer. I don't know what our opinions on More Beer is.
One cap is gray, one cap is gold. Actually, Brewmaster is one of our suppliers.
Okay.
So.
And so a good strategy, especially with, again, going back to diacetyl, is do a bunch of samples and dose them at different levels. And you start with the lowest, kind of like your vision test too. And you keep sampling them up. And then you get to figure out, and they'll have like an equation too. To know what your flavor threshold is for diacetyl. So it's a fun experiment to see at what point do you pick it up.
Yeah, that's a great way to start learning it in there too. Again, like we said before, picking beers out that actually have it in there is a great way to learn it in the real market. We have a local brewery here in town. One of their most popular beers is just chock full of it, and people love it. For some reason, the mouthfeel, the corniness in that beer is just perfect for everybody. They absolutely love it, and I can't go near it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's literally one of those that I can taste, and I'm like, yeah, somebody took that pump and just whoop, movie popcorn butter right into my glass. But
drink it?
I don't think so.
I thought I might have. Because I think I drank one and gave you one. Did you already say thank you to Joel?
Yeah, I haven't. I got lost. Joel, thank you very much. Yes, definitely factor in the intent behind drinking. But that's this beer. I mean, I know.
Jake, are they 22s or 12s? That's a good question.
I think it was 22s. I drink that beer even though I don't like it with the intent of learning this flavor because I know I'm weak in that flavor. Okay.
The kits are pricey too. So get some friends and that's a good club thing. But yeah, just get some friends together. And yeah, it sucks.
Pop it into some Bud Light and then go away, right?
Yeah. So we were also talking about this. That's in diacetyl is actually appropriate in some beers, though. Czech Pilsner being one of those, having a little bit of the diacetyl. I mean,
A lot of English style beers are the ones that you really think about those in.
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Because they're designed to flocculate out super early before they can clean up their poop.
Basically.
Yeah. Do you want to address how do we avoid it or why do we get it?
Yes, we should.
Definitely. Okay.
Who wants to do that?
So first of all, the easiest way to avoid it is to use yeasts that just don't make it. Most quikes are super safe. So if you're using Lutra or Voss or Hornadal, you're probably never going to get it. Most of that comes from the temperature that they ferment on. Basically, how you avoid it with yeasts that do ferment or create diacetyl is you have some sort of a temperature elevation where you make sure that yeast is active all the way through fermentation and into the beginning stage of conditioning, like when it starts to actually brighten out. So lager yeasts are notorious. If you ferment lagers at 52 to 48 or whatever you ferment them at, and then you never do a diacetyl rest, which is raising that beer up to 70 or 68, or I don't know what you do for yours, but in that temperature range to let the yeast remetabolize the diacetyl or pentane-dione is another VDK, then you can potentially get some butters.
Yeah. Diacetyl rest is definitely one of your better strategies with that temperature control and just letting fermentation finish, cutting it off too early.
Yeah.
The yeast will, or taking it off the yeast too early, the yeast will kind of eat it back up.
Yep.
Or reabsorb it. I don't know what it does with it, but
Yeast is your bestie.
yeah, yeast is good. Oh, this could be.
They are 12s.
They are 12s. I know. I just found that. I didn't find that, but I found something else. We're drinking this instead.
Okay. So Crispy Boys by BT Ridley, this is a good beer. Azaka Mosaic Ella Citrus, made with Lutra Quake. It's nice and relatively clear. You've got some fruity aromas to it, soft on the palate, so I'm attributing that to some water chemistry was done. But also you did a really good job of reducing any hop material that would have been in there, so I don't get any hop burn or anything like that. Overall, it's a very pleasant beer.
Yeah. I will also say this is really good for how long we stored it, too. It was given to us or bottled 8/28, I'm assuming last year.
Holy moly.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, I'm very impressed if that's the case.
That is my bad.
Don't worry about that. No oxidation.
By the way, your mouth is right there.
Whatever, I'm looking at it in the bright-ass light. No oxidation to speak of, which is awesome in there. Still really bright flavors coming from the hops, which is really cool.
Drunken Mario Kart tonight. I believe so, but I definitely need to make sure that my homework is done before Mario Kart, because if not, it's going to be turned in late. But I think I can make it happen.
Back away from the mic a little bit.
But I think I can make it happen.
There you go. That's better.
Perfect.
Yeah, so super delicious beer.
Yeah. I'm very, that date. Yeah, no oxidation and this hung around really nice. With oxidation, we're going to look for some browning in there or the hops to fall off, and I still get pretty nice hops aroma. It's not papery, it's not wet cardboard, which is a nice segue into our next off flavor.
The hops, I think.
Also, my wife might have to turn the eyes rolled emoji into a happy face emoji for me to make sure that I can be there.
That means send her wine.
That's the way to do it.
So, I mean, that's amazing. I imagine the hops were probably brighter when it was fresher, but they're still really nice in there. This is a great beer. This is delicious beer.
Good job. All right. Any other questions on diacetyl, or are we ready to go on?
Well, we're talking about... We've already been talking about that. We're on it right now, oxidized. So we might as well just continue. Oxidized. So that's what we're looking for in this beer. And, on the homebrew scale, you put it in here. This is one of the hardest things to do because of the limitations of equipment for homebrewers is keep your beer and they're not getting your beer oxidized.
And I actually recommend a lot of homebrewers their first recipes. You want to do IPA, but I was do a dark beer. You can get away with for multiple reasons, but the main one is I have a buddy that wants to do a hazy, and I'm all for it. I freaking love hazies. I mean, that's the main thing I do. But I now that I know everything about oxidation and every opportunity that we get dissolved oxygen, you're it stresses me out thinking about it.
It's impossible. How do you do it on the homebrew scale? I actually have successfully done an open fermented hazy though.
Really?
Yeah.
It's the transfer is the part. So oxidation, right, is the experience of like paperiness, wet cardboard, stuff like that. In your hazies, you're gonna have the hop profile fall off like pretty hard. I remember when I did hazies as a homebrew, like I drank them fast because it was like a weekend and it just turns a corner hard. But it's a transfer. I don't know how I can avoid DO like at my homebrew scale and my system and transferring it to the keg and stuff like that. Like,
yeah.
That stresses me out.
The one thing that I kind of accidentally fell into this because I had an open fermenter for a while. That was my first 25-gallon fermenter, and so all I could do was open fermentation, and that was right at the beginning of when like hazy IPAs became popular.
Yeah.
And so I had to do it, and my strategy was just go into the keg at 10:25.
Oh wow, and that's a great idea. So a good way to avoid oxidation, and this is on kind of the hazy train. I don't know if you folks talked about your last hazy conversation, is yeast is going to scrub the oxygen from your beer. So doing that transfer into the keg while there's still some work to be done scrubs maybe some of the oxygen concerns, but dry hopping at large dosages is also going to introduce some oxygen into your beer.
Yep.
Gosh, it's stressful therking about every opportunity that oxygen like.
Yeah. One of my favorite beers that I actually did was a session. It was supposed to be like a like a runner IPA. It was like 2.8%, tons of maltodextrin and stuff in there. And I did do a huge dry hop on it, and I was able to get that in there with zero oxidation. I did use ascorbs. I think I did double ascorbs. I did mash and early fermentation ascorbs. And then I went into the keg at 10:25, and that beer probably because I had 1.5 kegs full. The second keg probably didn't get to it for, I don't know, a month or two, and it was still.
That's awesome.
Still bright.
Nice. All right, somebody asked for it. Fun fact with Timothy. Did you know a sloth's claws work opposite of most things? Their relaxed position is closed, and they actually have to exert effort to open them. Now you do.
Do you look these things up like ahead of time, or?
As I find, well, some of them I know.
He drinks a lot of Snapple.
Yeah. True.
Popsicle sticks or whatever.
Every time I find something interesting, I normally just save it on there.
In your brain, or like actually somewhere?
Most of the time, just my brain.
That's
But I
impressive.
also do like to make up facts and just see if anybody realizes they're fake or not. I haven't done that for a fun facts with Timothy yet, but I do it to my wife all the time, and it's gotten to a point where she looks at me, and she'll be like, "Oh, what's it look like outside?" And be like, "Hey, the sky's blue today," and she'll be like, "I don't believe you.
Yeah.
This isn't real. Are you lying to me, or is this true?"
So oxidized flavors can present in IPAs. It's the same kind of flavor that is like the browning of a banana or an apple when you open them up. I don't know if we're going on that tangent.
No,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, color. I mean,
I just wasn't listening to you guys for a while, and I was like, it sounded like a pause. So
that's like my biggest thing
Yeah,
with like
yeah.
hazy pictures is like, I feel like I can tell if a hazy's oxidized just based off of like people's pictures.
Yeah.
Like, online.
You're like,
That's not right.
Yeah, you could. It's the same thing. Like you open up an avocado, the insides. That actually might be bacterial. I'm not sure what turns in avocado colors, but yeah, open up a banana and it turns to that brown color. Open up an apple and it starts to brown. It's the same thing as a hazy IPA. Fun fact: the apples that you can get pre-sliced in the stores are coated in ascorbic acid.
That was my line.
No.
I hear you're a fan of that product.
So yeah, so you will probably say ascorbic acid. I will probably say halcyon, and we'll probably say Heidelberg, and something about no crystal malts in every live stream.
The no crystal is actually the only thing we haven't mentioned so far.
Is that on the?
It should be.
Crystal
on the
malt
bingo?
when it oxidizes that's like another reason
my
I hate
God,
crystal
yeah.
malt, or don't hate. I prefer not to use.
You know, you're on the right show.
Yeah.
You are on the right show. We hate crystal. Nah,
Is like, again, oxidation of that like turns it into things I don't enjoy.
Later H. Rel.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, because it turns into
Thanks, bro. See
like
you
it's a weird caramel. So normal crystal malts are like they can be semi-sweet, they can have some sweetness behind them, but then once they oxidize, they become that sickly, cloying sweetness. It's like a weird, not good, almost metallic sweetness.
Yeah. To me, it tastes like you're sucking on pennies.
Yeah.
And it's not enjoyable. For me, that's an overuse of crystal malt, as well as crystal malt being oxidized. It's just literally like you took a dirty penny and just shoved it in your cheek and sucked on it for a minute.
Yum.
Like, it's not good.
It's the best.
Don't use it.
How many?
They're getting distracted over here. So
I feel like we need to turn this into like everybody gets a randomized board though. So you got to have a button to randomize it, so everyone's got it in different
spots.
Yeah,
That's probably a way to do it.
I mean, yeah.
Smart people.
We'll get people on that.
All right, so where are we at? So
so we were talking about oxidation.
In different beer styles, you can get away with oxidation.
Oh yeah, and some of it's actually
a lot of import
really
beers.
good.
Well, a lot of import beers are known for that oxidized flavor, which is why it's actually in the BJCP guidelines as it's going to taste caramel sweet because the beer is probably oxidized by the time it gets to you.
I would say doing Belgian strongs, especially when you're barrel aging them, the oxidation is actually something you're looking forward to because it gives you some nice sherry-like flavors in there and enhances a little bit more of the fruity flavors that can come out of it.
Alcohol makes the oxidation taste better in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the exception of Imperial IPAs.
I mean, barrel aging, it's inherently going to get oxidized. Like, with all off flavors, there's very few exceptions of, like, it's appropriate in some places. It's just knowing in what level and what form it's appropriate.
Exactly. 100% on that.
People keep asking about my painted nails. I'm just going to throw this out there. It's very manly to paint your nails. So I challenge any of you guys to go ahead and paint your nails and then tag us in a picture with your nails painted because it's very manly.
Bonus points if you can actually like paint the Genus logo into it.
Ooh,
I will
someone
give
does
you
that.
A solid air high five.
Yeah, I might even send you a beer if you do that, depending on how close you are.
Yeah, depending on what the shit is. Right? And so dissolved oxygen, this can happen almost anywhere. This is actually a hard thing in home brewing is how easily the oxidation happens. And it happens almost instantly. And when you're in home brewing, you don't have closed transfer systems. It's hard to get those closed transfer systems, I guess is what I should say.
Unless you spend a lot of money.
Yeah, and cost prohibitive. Where for us in the professional world, that's literally the equipment that we work on is all closed systems. So it's easy for us and really, really hard as a home brewer. And again, this kind of goes back into competitions, why IPAs and competitions are going to be a little bit harder, is preventing this oxidation going on.
Even with bottles, any sort of heat and cooling effect, even in bottles, is going to have some sort of pickup of oxygen. So it's very, very hard to avoid.
Yeah.
Let's get into residual sweetness a little bit, because that's another one that I feel like a lot of home brewers don't understand. And they think their beer's really good with residual sweetness when a lot of times it can be inappropriate. So a couple reasons this can happen. If you're an all grain brewer, just a high mash temp. A lot of people are like, I'd mash it at 160. And then they have a really thick beer. And if they bring it to me, I'm going to tell them that it's inappropriately thick. And they don't know. And that's usually one of the reasons why. Obviously, we talked about over caramelized grist. And the caramelization the caramel malts being extra sweet can happen with the beer itself oxidizing, or it can also happen from the malts being oxidized, which would come from poor storage. I.e., if you buy your malts online, especially pre-crushed malts, it's going to be sickly sweet. Or just too much caramel malt in general. Those are my and poor yeast health. That's the other one I'm going to throw in there. If your yeast is dumb.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that for overly sweet beers? That I see that a lot with homebrewers, and so wanted to add that one.
And it's kind of unfortunate, especially. I don't know. I'm not trying to be mean in any way, but a lot of Americans like sweet things. It's just kind of our culture. It's our palates. We love sweet things.
It's why we invented hazies. It's why we invented pastry stouts.
I mean, literally. Belgian lambics coming over into the United States had to literally be sweetened because Americans didn't like the sourness when they were originally coming over, which is fine. I love sweet things. I will eat a spoonful of sugar. It helps the medicine go down. But beyond that, so a lot of homebrewers will drink a little bit sweeter beers and be like, oh, this is great. But especially with something like a West Coast IPA, you are hiding so much behind that, and the real flavor can't come out while it's too sweet. A beer will taste so much better and better put together without that residual sugar.
And it should
Most
be
of the time.
intentionally sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want it sweet, I guess. It's
Yeah.
like, And yeah, West Coast should be bone dry. And like I'll add things like dextrose to West Coast IPA because I want it to dry out like even more.
Yeah. You want to be sure that the hops are the highlight and the malts are just kind of there. I'll talk. This kind of goes in with this, but another thing that I see a lot on the homebrew scale, and this is going to be the last one, and maybe take a couple questions before we close out the stream and get opened up. But over-esterification is another common thing that I see with homebrew beers.
The classic rinse.
Yeah, the old school rinse. Over-esterification would happen if you're using an ester-producing yeast or a yeast that produces a lot of esters, but you either, number one, underpitch, which I've said this time and time again, the number one thing that you can do for making good, clean, commercial quality home beer at home is going to be taking care of your yeast, i.e. big pitches, lots of oxygen, making sure it's kept in suspension, oxygen pre-fermentation, not to confuse the don't oxidize your beer.
Yeah. All right, so we are drinking a not carbonated barrel-aged Belgian-style Tripel in the barrel. Holy shit! In the barrel for 3 years. Original FG was 1010, and then the current FG is 1002. So I'm guessing there might have been a little Brett in that barrel.
When you first poured this, I was scared that you poured an IPA.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a good example of like oxidized IPA color-wise.
Oh, wow.
But
This is a ton of barrel
great
quality.
smelling. This
Yeah.
is great.
I would say the barrel quality is actually a little bit too aggressive on the palate. It adds tannin that is a little bit over-assertive in my mind. But other than that, there's a lot of flavor there.
And the barrel almost smells port-ish. It
Yeah.
has that really high fruit chocolate note.
Yeah.
The nose is lovely.
Oh, that's delicious. There was
got a lot
definitely
going on.
Brett in there.
I do get a little bit of that, like it like dries your tongue a little bit.
Yeah,
from the
my
wood.
that's tongue scraping. We got a lot of wood in our mouth now.
That is delicious.
All right, let's get into if you got any questions, anything that we've said over the course of the stream. If you got any questions for Ryan and Hello Beer, where can you find his beer, all that stuff, throw them out there. We will. Do you want to just plug your? How do you find you on Instagram and?
We're Hello Brew Co. on Instagram. I do want to throw out like make a formal announcement, I guess.
Sure.
So we are moving. We are leaving Spokane at June 30th, and we're looking to relocate to Fort Collins, Colorado. If we have friends in Colorado, feel free to reach out to us. But we're looking to continue doing what we're doing, but in Colorado. So
Cool.
yeah, this is the first time putting it out there.
I know we saw a couple of Colorado people on the stream. So if you're near Fort Collins,
Please.
Definitely
Hit it
go
up.
drink
Hit us
some
up.
Hello, because
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
delicious.
And on Instagram. But yeah,
Yeah.
let's do questions.
All right, I saw a good one in here. See Stackhouse, can too high a pressure slow or stop worm fermenting quake? Yeah, if your pressure is too high, then the osmotic pressure on the outside of the yeast is going to prevent it from doing its whole metabolizing thing very effectively. So if the pressure is too high, you can stop fermentation, definitely.
it's probably a surprising amount of PSI that it can handle. Like a lot of times when we're doing pressure fermentation, even with warm fermenting quake, 15 PSI is kind of where we go, but that quake will survive up to 18 PSI. And if it's hot enough, there's a lot of energy in the system. So it doesn't take a lot of energy actually for the yeast to get their job done. So if you are fermenting at like 95 degrees with Lutra and you're at 18 PSI, I don't know if I've experimented higher than that. At some point,
Yeah.
cells are going to explode. So I don't know what that point
Yeah.
is, but
I-
yeah, it can slow it down, but it's probably higher than you think in terms of pressure. And most, most PRVs that you have on tanks aren't going to go too much higher than 15 PSI.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you probably don't need to worry about it because other factors will prevent that before getting there. But it will definitely change the fermentation. Of course, you're going to get a lot less esters because of that. It's going to act like it's fermenting a little bit cooler because of the pressure on it.
Hops and Gnarly, what's up? He lives in Colorado.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's another
Yeah.
YouTuber.
Good.
There you go. All right. So have you pressure fermented any of your quakes? Well, you moved away
I only
from
did
quake.
one. I did one,
Yeah.
and then so the first ones I did, I thought it was the yeast because it kept like changing. But now that I know more about Sabro, I'm pretty sure it was the Sabro that kept changing as it aged.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like I was freaked out of not having a product I could predict going out, of like sampling it a couple of weeks later, of being like, this is a different beer. Not necessarily in a bad way, but like it just makes sales like the logistics.
You know,
Owning a brewery, I guess.
well, no, that actually brings up a good point I think we didn't get into in homebrewing is actually knowing the conditioning time of your beers. Not all beers, and most beers, do not taste the best right when they're carbonated and kegged. You need a little bit of time for these things to taste good.
Yeah.
So giving your beer the time that it needs to taste delicious is an important point.
I do want to experiment with that yeast when I have more fermentation space. I
Yeah.
want to get back into that game.
It is a little bit unpredictable, I will say that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's delicious, but it's not the same beer every time.
Yeah,
that's
which
for sure.
stresses me out from a production side.
Sad.
Like,
Yeah.
when you're, I like
right.
some prediction.
Hops and gnarly. See, you need to move in right next to Crooked Stave.
Oh yeah, that place is cool.
And then send us all of them.
All of them.
All of
With the Olive Nation flavors, what would be the best amounts to start with them to tweak flavors? One on a 5-gallon batch. And that's hard to say because they're going to change flavor to flavor. But what we like to do is we'll take a pint of beer and we will add, like fractions of a milliliter to the pint at a time. Taste, see where we like it, add a little bit more, and then when we get the amount that we want, we'll add about 2/3 of that to the actual keg itself and see if that's where we like it, and then we'll kind of adjust up from there. So we estimate, we get it in the pint, and then we estimate under before actually dialing in our flavor.
All right, I'm going to hit on this real quick. Nocturnal brewer, can you use a PRV on a fermenter that says max PSI is 2 to 3? Is it a good idea? Probably not. But all fermenters have a max working pressure and then a failure pressure. And most of the time, the failure pressure is a hell of a lot higher than the working pressure is. But if that's the max working pressure, that means it's only guaranteed to be sealed up into that pressure. So there is a potential that you could open seals or have some venting or other failure points going on if you go over the max working pressure. Can you do it? Yes. Never go over the max failure pressure because that's at that point that it'll probably explode. It's not generally the best idea to.
Ooh, Delonious Monk. How important is it to hit a 1.000
Yes.
repeated FG on a seltzer? And how can you restart a stuck fermentation? Yes, it is important. You don't want, first of all, if you're doing corn sugar, which is what we do, corn sugar doesn't taste very good. It tastes a little, it's sugary, but it tastes a little bit weird to me. If I'm going to flavor any seltzer with a sugar, it's going to be a natural sugar like from fruit. So for that reason, but also for the reason that seltzers need to be bone dry. If you have a stuck fermentation in a seltzer, a little bit of yeast energizer can help, or just kind of kicking it back up, activating it with turbulating the yeast as long as it's still closed system, or adding fresh yeast. Those are the 3 strategies that I would say for kicking it up. But more nutrient, some energizer, that's the number one thing to do.
For seltzers, do you finish like ciders? Like I've never made a seltzer below actually like 1.0. 'cause
Generally.
They'll be like 0.998.
Truly, not the brand, but in truth, the seltzer
That's a good
itself
beer,
is
seltzer,
right, is probably finished all the way out at that 1.00. But since alcohol is less viscous than water,
measures.
it drops below on that. So yeah, it does drop below. And I mean, I guess it's important and it's not important. It depends on what you're making and what you're using. Like Peter said, corn sugar, if you're using a sugar source that's a little bit different and off in the flavor, get it all out of there. The biggest reason that most everybody ferments down to bone dry on seltzer is because that's the way that you get the low carb and the low calorie content that seltzers started out being for diet drinks for, not
That's how
diet
they
drinks,
smoothie
but
seltzer.
like, yeah.
Then just
Yeah.
throw some lactose in there, and that's
I want to do milkshake
that one
seltzers now.
in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's get
that's
it
that
all
one.
sweet.
Let's go
Well, that's
there.
happening.
It's called juice.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's going to be a really cool thing when, we can start selling some of these seltzers with bigger, better flavors.
Yeah.
Rather than just trying to stick with, it needs to be healthy. I'm like, no, it's booze. It needs to be tasty.
If it does stall, though, there's also a risk of off flavors from just fermentation byproducts.
Ooh,
So
yeah.
you want to make sure that it completes its fermentation and has a proper conditioning just to eliminate all the funkinesses.
All right. This is a question I've seen a couple times. Funky Brewer, is there any drawbacks to adding clarifier and dry hopping simultaneously?
Yes. You risk hop creep. If your yeast is falling out, it doesn't have a temp. So if your yeast is falling out and simultaneously creating small fermentations from biotransformation, then there is a chance of getting diacetyl in your beer. And I've had a handful of hazies that were, fell prey to that, and it doesn't taste good.
No.
I would say on that, I mean, Clarity Firm isn't necessarily a clarifier, but having that in with your dry hops wouldn't create the same issue.
Well, that goes in
Clarity Firm
that
is
goes in the
something way
beginning of
different.
fermentation
Yeah.
now. Clarity Firm goes in right when you pitch your yeast.
It helps create clear beers, but it's not a clarifier. So don't think of Clarity Firm as a clarifier.
Bourbon barrel-aged seltzer, you laugh about that, but
Literally, yeah.
people are also doing soured seltzers right now. So I could see if you did
I want to try that. Yes. Well, we
if you did a
we
funky
do it.
seltzer, I could see a bourbon barrel-aged doing something.
It's
I would,
called watered down bourbon.
yeah, I would be willing to
Alcoholic watered down bourbon.
Yeah.
experiment in seltzers. I mean, at that point, we're getting in the canned cocktail realm, but experimenting in seltzers to see if we could push some of those flavors out of there is, I mean, if I could have a delicious can of old fashioned that I could take anywhere, like, that would be amazing. That would be amazing.
It would be, but
But at that point, we're in canned
Jake, we didn't
cocktails,
find your beer. I'm sorry, Jake.
No, Jake.
I think
I think
I'm pretty sure Tim and I both, because you dropped off 2 bottles, and I'm pretty sure I drank one immediately and then gave one to Tim that night.
I
I'm
wanted to try
pretty
it
sure
for the
that's.
record, Jake.
Yeah. Sorry. Bring some more, Jake. Bring
If
some
you
more.
got an extra one for Ryan, he missed out.
What else do we got on there? Homebrew store guys say gelatin works way better than Clarity Firm. Any thoughts? One, they're 2 different products. They do 2 different things. So depending on what you're going for, one works way better than the other. Gelatin, in my...
I don't like using gelatin. I'll just gonna upfront say I don't like using gelatin.
I was trying to be a little nicer about it.
Well, we have chitosan and kieselsahl, first of all, that are already in liquid form. We don't have to heat up water and dissolve the gelatin in there. And if you have chitosan and kieselsahl, then or biofine is the same as kieselsahl.
Yeah.
I just don't get why you would use a product that takes more work to put in.
Well, and I worry about like contamination. Every time you're adding something to your beer, I'm like, contamination, like concerns. I know you're boiling the water, but you like never know. Like,
But you also have to cool it down before dissolving it. So you boil the water and then you got to cool it down before, because you can't add it in hot. I don't know.
There's also the thing that I've seen, if you over gelatin beers, it strips flavors out. It will start pulling flavor molecules out, as well as all the haze forming. Clarity Firm is different.
Have you ever used that?
no, but I feel like I've seen that posted several times now.
Betadine, I'm guessing it's another halogen-based, iodine-based thing.
Okay. Clarity Firm is actually very
iPad
different.
died.
It works to break down gluten enzymes in there, as well as break down a couple of other haze-forming particles that are associated with hops.
Tim, you're the only one with access to the stream now.
Oh.
Unless Ryan puts it on his phone.
Okay.
Oh, I do not know how to access
That's
that.
all right.
You go to
so,
YouTube.
Yeah, it's
What?
You go to YouTube and
What's
look up
YouTube?
Genus. Exactly.
Genus, yeah, right. It's one of those things that we don't prefer to use gelatin. They work insanely different. Gelatin, if you're using it just on a Clarity standpoint, gelatin probably works better than Clarity Firm, but I think Clarity Firm is a better product if you use it right.
I see a bunch of questions about like pressure and fermentation. I'd recommend checking out steam beer and like reading about the history of steam beer, or California Common is how it's called now, because that beer is like the original of like looking at fermentation under pressure and manipulating the pressure of fermentation, and like that's the hallmark of what a California Common, one of the hallmarks of a California Common. So I think that would be a good pathway to learn more about how pressure affects your fermentation.
Also, the German process of spunding, S-P-U-N-D, spunding or a spunding valve. Those are awesome. It's a way to create beers under pressure that are lager-like, but without being at cold temperatures. It's something that we do all the time, recapturing CO2 to carbonate as well. So pressure fermentation, it's been around for a long time. We've used it forever, but it's one of those things that kind of fell off in fashion as we got more fancy fun equipments.
But I've been seeing those like valves more and more on the unit tanks now. It's like, I mean, the brewery here.
We flooded one a couple days ago.
Oh yeah, it's
I saw.
Yeah, that was
it's popular.
incredible.
One of the breweries here that is known for their Czech pills, he is trying to not even do any forced carving in his Czech anymore. So he's trying to spund it, and
I actually think I think natural carbonation tastes better than forced carbonation.
The bubbles feel different.
It's different. Yeah. It is way different. I will say almost every single beer that's produced in-house here, it does not use forced carbonation. Part of that's because I'm lazy and I don't want to take the extra couple of days to force carbonate, but also I can just screw down the spooning valve, capture extra good flavors coming off of it. I do think that sometimes it's inappropriate. If we have the pressure up too high in, say, a West Coast IPA, we tend to get some of those musty smells that normally blow off in the beginning. So use the pressure fermentation sparingly and in the right ways, and it's beautiful. I highly recommend it.
There's a couple questions on the betadine. I just looked it up. It sounds like it's a similar iodine solution. I have not used betadine specifically. I use just regular iodine-based solution like you'd get from Iota 4 or 5 Stars IOStar. So I can't really speak to betadine. Halogens are technically the best sanitizers available, but I still use acid-based sanitizers like Star San and SaniClean. So I always fear any halogen-based sanitizers because of the potential flavor if you don't use the right solution. They're technically not no rinse.
All right, Vincent, Galvin, you've asked this a couple times. How do you know how much yeast to pitch? You usually pitch 1 packet dry or liquid per 5 gallons. It's honestly quite different and variable, but it's based on cell counts for whatever you're doing in there. A lot of it is also based on gravity too, so that it's not quite a set thing, but a good stance is that if you're making a more alcoholic beer, and I think a lot of places suggest at 1.060 to upping your pitch rate on it, or if you're doing beers that need, how to describe it? Beers that need extra things. So like Quake, you're going to severely underpitch Quake. I think a lot of the time the slurry count is like a teaspoon for 5 gallons, especially if you want those big ester profiles. Underpitching some Belgian strains also produces the same thing, getting those really big, nice ester profiles coming out of it. Versus something like a lager, you want to overpitch that most of the time because the way the yeast works so slowly. You want to have far more than you need in there to get it going.
Any yeast starter will help with that too. Like, have it chomping and kind of already partying once you introduce it too.
Yeah, if you're ever worried about it, yeast starters are the way to go because your yeast is up, it's fermenting, it's gonna go right away.
Polonius Moses, how dare you blaspheme the Brulosophy brew gods with your anti-gelatin stance?
Yeah, I'm not exactly anti-gelatin, but there's so much better products out there. All right, yeah, okay. We can close it out. Okay, Vincent, Funky Brewer, is right on that. Use a yeast calculator for what you're doing. Like I said, everything's a little bit different in what you're trying to do for it. Generally in 5-gallon batches, 1 packet, 1 sachet is generally enough, but high grav beers, lagers, definitely need more. All right, thanks for joining us.
Sanitizer for a commercial. Do you guys say PAA? Do you even use PAA?
Use what?
Parasitic?
No, I've considered it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I've considered
it.
All
right. Okay. Wait, there was one. We lost it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We enjoyed having you here. Again, this is Ryan from Hello Brew Co. Look him up, like all of his stuff, buy his beer, and then when he's in Colorado, buy more of his beer and send beer to us.
I'll have beer in Seattle this week too. So
Ooh, yes. So if you're over there, go see it, Reverend. I'm looking at you, buddy.
He's a Whidbey.
What? Close enough.
That's
like a ferry ride away. So subscribe to our channel. Smash the like button. Like the smash button. Either way, smash them both, and subscribe to all of our stuff. We love you.
Ryan, do you want us to link your Pornhub account in the description?
Just the Instagram works.
Just the Instagram. And the